Welcome to episode 39 of the AMT podcast. I hope you're all crushing it as always. Been making good inroads with my one-to-one students. They're now getting a firm grip on how to filter the markets, how to spot opportunities, and how to execute the strategies consistently. We talk daily, we watch each other trade, and I analyze and critique the student's approach. The student whose results I'm sharing right now has never even watched a race, so he knew nothing coming in. He's starting at ground zero, just like I did. The only difference is he's managed to become profitable around 8 times faster than I did. So that's just testament to the fact that what I teach works. Now the groundwork has been laid and arguably the hardest part is now done. It's just a process of maintaining that consistency throughout the year as the calendar and market opportunities evolve and me just watching them and helping them gradually just level up. So I'll be keeping a good eye on them as they do so, and I look forward to sharing those results with you. The last week has been admittedly difficult since adverse weather conditions has meant a lot of cancelled events. So we're hoping to get back on track really quickly next week, hopefully. But if you're interested in me teaching you one-to-one how to trade profitably, where I show you my methods and I break down all the variables that influence price and I help you scale up, then head to anymantrading.com/products. I'll post a link in the description below where you can book a one-to-one call with me and we can chat and see if I'm a fit for you. But without further ado, in today's episode, I want to talk about the importance of mental liquidity. This is an extremely important topic that needs to be understood because a lot of people don't even know what it means, and those that do struggle with it. But if you understand it, you'll know how difficult it is for most people. But if you come to terms with it and understand why you should implement it, then you will increase your chances of success exponentially. So what is mental liquidity? It essentially means the ability to quickly abandon previously held beliefs in light of new information. In life, we begin learning things from a young age. The reason for that is because a child has no preconceived bias towards anything: race, politics, diet, religion. A child is essentially the most mentally liquid because his ability to absorb information is most potent. There's no reason for a child to reject what it's taught in favor of something else because they don't know any better. Give me a child till he's 7 years old and I will show you the man, said Saint Ignatius Loyola, and I hope I pronounced that correctly. Jesuit priests who were interested in spreading and converting people to Catholicism understood very well that when the neural networks are being formed in children, they are largely governed by emotion, which will affect their behavior throughout life. This is why past a certain age, it's nearly impossible to change somebody's beliefs. When someone has viewed every facet of their life through a religious lens, it's nearly impossible to teach them to think objectively. Their whole identity revolves around their religious belief. So when you ask them what they think about something, they can't. They have to quote their opinion from a religious perspective. And the same thing happens with politics. Whether someone is a lifelong conservative or liberal, any new piece of information that does not fit their left or right-leaning view is rejected and blamed on the opposing party. It's rare they'll ever acknowledge or call out the obvious errors in thought or policy, because to do so runs in direct opposition to their beliefs. There's at least a childlike innocence about people who lack the development in cognitive thinking from a young age, as explained earlier. But what's worse is people who do it out of pure ego. You'll be surprised how many people would rather cut their nose to spite their face and continue to engage in wrong thought or behavior because they're too proud to admit they're wrong. Or they'll change their opinion on the sly in light of new information and spin their way out of it. We see this every day with politicians who are masters in deceit. How many times have you heard a politician make bold promises during their campaign only to do a 180 when in office just to pump falling poll numbers or because of new information that's come to light? And then when questioned, they hire their spin doctors to weasel their way out. Or how many times have you seen politicians who are dictatorial in their approach? No matter what evidence or new data comes to light, if it runs counter to their promises, they still double down. These politicians are often seen as delivering and living up to their promise, just so they can appeal to their base. But both are different sides to the same coin. Whether they change course or bulldoze their way through, the one thing you'll never hear a politician do is admit to wrongdoing. You'll never hear a politician apologize. And after all, why would they? Acknowledgement of failure is a death sentence for a politician's career. They stand to make millions post office from speeches and book deals. Who's going to want to listen to a self-admitted failure? There are also many successful people who suffer from lack of mental liquidity. There's numerous financial giants who continue to trash cryptocurrency despite its growth and still maintain faith in fiat currency despite high taxes and rampant inflation and lack of sovereignty and control and privacy by governments and banks. Successful businessmen like Peter Schiff, who've been wrong every single step of the way with regards to their Bitcoin projections, still continues to dig his grave further, trashing Bitcoin almost daily despite its massive gains over the last decade, as opposed to gold, which he continues to pitch. To do a U-turn now would mean having to accept 10 years of being wrong. That would be such a stain on his reputation, which relies on metal trading, that no one's going to trust his opinion again. Or take Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger, two of the most iconic stock market investors of the last era. They've called crypto everything from gambling to stupid to crazy to rat poison. Warren Buffett has also referred to Wall Street as a casino and financial derivatives as financial weapons of mass destruction. Yet he's made billions of dollars buying mispriced options, and he even bought a huge amount of stock in Goldman Sachs. So much for a guy who's against Wall Street and gambling. To admit that there's huge profits to be made in speculative instruments would destroy his reputation as a laid-back passive investor who only invests in dairy farms and candy companies and Coca-Cola. When you've built your brand catering to a certain type of audience, when you've dug your roots so deep into one way of thinking, there's just too much to lose reputation-wise. But thankfully, it's a burden that we don't have to face. For us regular Joes, the only real consequence to acknowledging a wrongdoing or an error in thought process is just short-term embarrassment and maybe potentially a bit of hypocrisy. And when you think about it, that's a small price to pay in the grand scheme of things. Acknowledging failure or an error in approach or your thought process and accepting new evidence is the most liberating and freeing thing that you can do. And this process of accepting wrong thought or action and changing your mind is what I refer to as mental liquidity. And it's often a mark of maturity. Embarrassment and humiliation does not last. People are quick to forget things. The upside of being mentally liquid is that it means you're nimble enough to change direction. And if you become successful, no one's going to remember when you failed. This is why no opinion is a hill worth dying on. Accept that people will disagree with you. Accept that as you go through life and experience new situations, what seemed real, given your limited scope at the time, wasn't true, or at least wasn't completely true, providing it's subjective, of course. If you're going to change your opinion on objective phenomena, like believing the earth is flat or believing every day is Saturday, then yeah, you deserve humiliation and embarrassment. But if it's on something subjective and indefinite, something that can't be proven or will likely change over time, like when it comes to making money or relationships or politics or religion, then don't cling on to it. Don't make it your whole identity. Be ready to accept that you are wrong and there's a better way. Be ready to accept that one day new information can run counter to it. Now, I didn't grow up in a particularly religious or political household where, you know, anything was rammed down my throat. And I have to credit my mother in particular for always encouraging me to think for myself, not to take anyone's word for anything, to always question, always challenge. That cognitive process was thankfully developed early in me. And despite the fact that I've erroneously doubled down and stood firm on wrong opinions, I have no problem admitting that I was wrong. I can hold my hand up and say, you know, I made a mistake in light of new information. It's happened to me in my personal and professional life. As a trader, for example, I turned profitable relatively quickly. It only took me a few months, but I did so on horse racing, and I did so without fundamentally understanding the variables that influenced price. And I was quite arrogant about that. In fact, I sort of built my brand around it and encouraged it somewhat. It wasn't until my profits topped out and even started to dwindle that I had to admit that my approach was wrong, or at least somewhat limited. From the limited standpoint that yes, you could still wing it and make money, I was right. But from the standpoint that I now have, where I believe it's possible to learn correctly and holistically to maximize your potential and profitability, it was a half measure. So I had to go back to the drawing board, rethink and relearn everything in order to launch myself to that next level. Essentially, I had to take a step back in order to go two forward. A lot of people would just double down and carry on, smiling as if it's all okay and maintain a facade of success rather than admit wrongdoing so that they can spend their time on rectifying the problem. I've been through the same issues with my personal relationships. When you're surrounded by the same people your whole life, that becomes your reality. Relationship and experiences you have with those you grow up with shape your life and outlook to such a huge extent that often you don't even realize how biased and likely you were to think a certain way until an outsider enters your life and shows you otherwise. Whether that's a friend or a girlfriend, outsiders nearly always offer a fresh, objective perspective because they've got no horse in the race. They can spot things that we miss. What they tell us is often uncomforting because we can't empathize with their viewpoint, and it can easily lead to fights and disagreements. But it takes mental liquidity to understand other people's point of view, to detach ourselves from our identity. And it takes humility to understand that, look, we all have blind spots and we get things wrong from time to time, which is especially the case when it comes to those closest around us. Sometimes we don't want to believe how others can see those that we love in a different light. This is often the case with organized criminals who still manage to maintain a loving wife and children despite their atrocities, because it's too painful to admit, and it forces introspection, and it forces people to think about the fact that they often enable people to do what they do. And that's just too much guilt to bear. When you understand the concept of mental liquidity, you'll begin to realize just how many people struggle to change their mind and how much of an advantage you are at if you're able to just keep your ego aside, keep your mind open, and just be ready to drop your stance in order to move to a higher understanding. The more closely you cling on to a belief and make it your identity, the harder it becomes to drop. Children who are constantly told what to do and don't develop the ability to learn and think for themselves, problem solve, question and challenge, are likely the ones who grew up to become one of those head-nodding, unquestioning drudges that the system relies upon. The school system only hardens it, but whilst those neural pathways harden and mature with time, it's still not impossible to change. If you want to become more mentally liquid, the fact that you're even watching this video is a start. If you made it this far, then you've probably realized that there is something that needs to change. And the first step to changing is acknowledgement. The second step is where people go wrong. Even I went wrong. People think goal setting is the solution. People think goal setting will change their environment, when in fact you have to do the entire opposite. Change your environment first. Go out of your home and create an environment that serves you. Go to a location that will unleash your potential without distraction. Turn off the fake news. Seek out friends who are going to keep you honest. Find people that will see you objectively for who you are, not people that want to control you and have a vested interest in how you think, and not yes men who are just going to nod at all your opinions. When you learn to see yourself as others see you under a different light, that's when real growth is allowed to happen. It can be embarrassing and it can be humiliating, but only for as long as you continue to stay that way. When you're ready to hear the hard truths and do something about it, that's when new possibilities will open up to you. Don't forget to like, share where possible. That really helps me out. And leave a comment. I read all the responses, so let me know what you guys think. I look forward to hearing from you, and I'll see you soon.